The polished glass doors of Northbridge Co. reflected the morning light of downtown Toronto, casting long shadows across the marble lobby. Rachel Morgan paused just inside, clutching a worn manila folder to her chest, her pulse loud in her ears. Beside her, little Lily, only 3 years old, twisted the hem of her faded blue dress, the one Rachel had washed carefully by hand the night before. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She had promised herself she would never drag her child into situations like these. But life rarely bowed to promises. Childcare was out of reach this week, and she couldn't afford to miss the interview. Not this one. Not when it could mean a new beginning. The sharp staccato of heels on marble broke through her thoughts. Catherine Blake, the HR manager, appeared with a clipboard tucked under her arm, her lips pressed thin as she surveyed the scene, arms folding with deliberate precision. "You brought a child," Catherine said flatly, her voice slicing through the polished air like glass on glass. Rachel straightened her shoulders, though her heart ached. "Yes, I had no choice. I couldn't leave her alone." Lily clutched her mother's hand tighter, her blonde curls bouncing as she peered curiously at the high ceilings and the glass elevators, racing upward. The innocence in her wide brown eyes was painfully at odds with the tension brewing around them. "This is a corporate office," Catherine continued, her tone dripping with disdain. "Not a daycare." "I understand," Rachel said quietly, forcing calm into her voice. "But I'm here. I'm prepared. I have everything you asked for." Catherine let out a sharp laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She turned toward the receptionist, who sat frozen behind her desk. "We screen for professionalism, not playdates." Rachel's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. She could feel the judgment radiating from every corner of the lobby, the suited employees passing by, the receptionist typing furiously to avoid eye contact, even the security guard by the door shifting his weight as if ready to intervene. Then it happened. Lily, sensing the storm in the room but not its meaning, reached toward the edge of the receptionist's desk and brushed against a paper cup. The cup tipped. Water splashed across the pristine marble floor. Rachel gasped, dropping to her knees instantly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, fumbling in her bag for tissues, blotting the spill with shaking hands. She didn't mean to, please. No one moved to help. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant clatter of keyboards from behind glass walls. Rachel crouched there on the cold floor, her old gray heels scuffed, her knees pressing painfully into the hard surface. She dabbed at the water while Lily stared, wide-eyed, at her mother's trembling hands. The weight of judgment was unbearable. Rachel felt like the marble itself would swallow her whole. And then the elevator chimed. All heads turned as the doors slid open. A man in a charcoal gray suit stepped out, tall and composed, the kind of presence that bent the air around him. His hair was neatly styled, his stride confident but unhurried. Even Catherine froze mid-sentence. It was Ethan Caldwell, the elusive CEO of Northbridge Co., the man whose face had graced the cover of Canadian Business and Forbes, often labeled the next visionary of Bay Street. At 36, he had built an empire of mergers and innovations. Though most employees had never seen him outside glossy profiles and quarterly meetings, he wasn't supposed to be here. Executives of his stature didn't linger in lobbies. Yet here he was, pausing mid-step as his eyes swept across the scene before him. A young woman kneeling on the floor, tissues pressed to a puddle of water, a child clutching her jacket, and a manager glaring with impatience, Ethan's brow furrowed ever so slightly. He did not raise his voice, but when he spoke, the room seemed to still. "Why don't you tell me why you're here, miss?" Rachel looked up, startled by the calm in his tone. "Morgan," she stammered. "Rachel Morgan." He nodded once, then gestured toward the seating area. "Let's sit." Catherine blinked, color rising in her face. "Sir, this candidate brought a child. I can see that," Ethan replied smoothly, his gaze steady. "And I can also see she's here on time, with her materials. So, let's hear what she has to say." Rachel's breath caught. She had braced herself for humiliation, for dismissal, but not this. Her chest tightened as Ethan pulled out a chair for her. Waiting until she sat before taking a seat himself, Lily climbed into Rachel's lap, sensing the sudden shift in energy. The room felt different now, less like a firing squad, more like a possibility. Take your time. Ethan said gently, his voice low but firm. Start wherever makes sense. Rachel swallowed hard, smoothing down Lily's dress as her hand fumbled for the resume inside her folder. Her throat was dry, but she forced herself to speak. I applied for the administrative support position, she began. I saw it posted online and thought it might be a chance for a fresh start. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes never leaving hers. Why now? Rachel's gaze flickered down to her daughter. Lily was tracing tiny circles on her mother's sleeve, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. Because I can't afford to wait anymore, Rachel whispered. For the first time that morning, the room held something other than judgment. It held silence, but a different kind. A silence of listening, of curiosity, of something beginning. Catherine stood stiffly behind them, arms folded, her disapproval heavy in the air. But Ethan ignored her completely. His focus remained on Rachel. Let's start with your story, he said quietly. Rachel took a long breath, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. I lost my husband 2 years ago. A drunk driver ran a red light on highway for 101. He never made it home. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he didn't interrupt. I'm sorry, he said simply. Rachel nodded, the way someone nods when grief is no longer new but still raw. I was 23. I had just started a part-time certificate in office administration. I thought it would help us get ahead. But after the accident, everything fell apart. My parents passed when I was a teenager, and his family cut ties after the funeral. It's just been Lily and me ever since. Her words echoed in the polished lobby, carrying more weight than any resume could. Lily peeked up at her mother's face, and Rachel pressed a kiss to her forehead before continuing. I've worked wherever I could, cafes, retail, evening cleaning shifts. I applied to Northbridge because I heard you had internal training programs. I thought, if I could just get in the door, maybe I could build something for us. Ethan studied her resume, sparse but neat, honest. You're still finishing school? Yes, online courses, after she's asleep. He glanced at Lily, now quietly tapping her shoes against the chair leg, patient in her own small way. Then his eyes returned to Rachel, and today, he asked, why bring her with you? Rachel's shoulders stiffened, but her chin lifted. I couldn't afford childcare this week. We lost our apartment last Friday. We're staying in a weekly motel. I didn't want to leave her there alone, not even for an hour. I know it's unprofessional, but I also knew this was my chance. So we got dressed. We practiced interview questions, and we came here. Catherine couldn't stay silent any longer. We can always reschedule without the child. Ethan raised a hand, silencing her. She came here prepared, he said firmly. We finish this now. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. He turned back to Rachel. Would you be willing to take a 2-week trial position? Entry-level office support. You'd report directly to me. Rachel blinked, her breath catching. She could hardly process the words. Yes, she said quickly, her voice breaking. Absolutely yes, Ethan nodded, rising smoothly to his feet. HR will draw up the paperwork today. You can start Monday. Lily, sensing victory without understanding its scale, clapped her small hands together, letting out a cheerful squeal. Ethan gave her the faintest smile before turning back to Rachel. There's an on-site daycare. We'll make sure she's placed. For the first time that day, Rachel felt the crushing weight of judgment lift, replaced by something else entirely. Not pity, never pity, but respect. As she rose, folder clutched to her chest and daughter in her arms. Ethan leaned slightly toward Lily and said quietly, You did great today. Lily grinned shyly, digging into her pocket. She pulled out a wrinkled heart-shaped sticker and pressed it into his palm. He didn't hesitate. He kept it, and in that small, unspoken exchange, something shifted. This was no longer just an interview. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. The lobby exhaled when Ethan Caldwell said, You can start Monday. It was as if the building itself heard a verdict and stood down from alert. But the humans inside didn't settle so easily. Shock has a way of rearranging faces, tightening some, softening others, revealing what's been hiding under polite expressions. Rachel felt the tremor in her knees only after she stood. The manila folder in her arms suddenly weighed less. Like a door she'd been pushing for months had finally swung open. Lily tucked her chin against Rachel's shoulder and sighed, that tiny, relieved sound children make when the adult world's storm passes overhead. Rachel kissed the crown of her daughter's head, breathing in the lemon soap she'd used in the motel sink that morning. Catherine Blake, however, did not exhale. Her jaw flexed once. The clipboard in her hand clicked as her thumb found the pen and snapped it back. "I'll notify HR," she said, the words kneaded flat. "There are forms, compliance, onboarding through Workday. We have processes," Ethan nodded. "Then let's follow them." His tone was courteous, final. "I'll have my office looped in." Rachel, the way he said her name, simple and steady, felt like a rope lowering into cold water. "Someone from HR will reach out by this afternoon." Rachel found her voice, shaky but sincere. "Thank you," she said. "Mr. Caldwell." "Thank you." He gave a small nod and turned away, not as a dismissal, but like a pilot banking through clean air, purposeful, practiced, already thinking of what needed doing next. As he reached the elevator, he looked down at his palm, at the crumpled heart-shaped sticker Lily had pressed there. He slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket with the same care he would tuck away a contract he intended to honor. When the doors closed, the lobby remembered how to move. The receptionist coughed into her elbow, suddenly fascinated by her keyboard. The security guard pretended to adjust his radio. Catherine lifted her chin. "I'll be in touch," she said to Rachel, the vowels clipped, the smile polished but unlit. "We'll see you Monday." "Monday," Rachel repeated, as if the day itself had been invented just for her. The email landed at 2:07 p.m. onboarding packet. Temporary badge. 2-week trial. Start time, 8:30 a.m. Department, Executive Operations Support. Reporting line, Office of the CEO. Childcare, Northbridge Daycare, Level 3. Provisional spot confirmed. Rachel read it twice, at the small laminate table in the motel room. The light by the window honey-thin and honest. Lily lay on the bed, coloring with a pencil stub, drawing suns with too many rays. The motel AC hummed like an apology. Rachel's chest filled fear, hope, a strange buoyancy she didn't recognize. "You got the job?" Lily asked, not looking up, but smiling with her whole face. "I got a chance," Rachel said. "Sometimes that's even more powerful." She typed back her confirmations with careful fingers, checked bus routes to Bay Street, mapped the daycare's entrance. She laid out clothes on the chair, her best blouse, pressed with a motel iron that hissed like it was remembering better days. She cleaned Lily's shoes with a damp washcloth until the rubber rims came back from gray to nearly white. Then she sat for a moment and let herself cry quiet, controlled, an overflow that felt less like grief and more like a tide turning. Catherine's version of the afternoon was very different. In her glass-walled office, she arranged papers that didn't need arranging and dialed extensions she could recite in her sleep. "Yes," the CEO intervened. She told legal. "No, I didn't say reschedule. I said we could." She mailed HR. "Ensure standard probationary time is documented." She pinged communications to flag. "Be mindful of optics around executive involvement in entry-level hiring." When the last message sent, she stared at her reflection in the monitor. It stared back. Precise hair, precise suit, precise career. She had built one policy at a time, brick over brick. She didn't dislike Rachel, she told herself. She disliked variables. And today, the biggest variable wore a charcoal suit and a sticker in his pocket. Ethan didn't tell anyone about the sticker. He didn't tell them about the moment in the lobby when everything slowed and his body did what his mind rarely allowed, simply notice. A young woman on her knees, cleaning up water that wasn't a mistake so much as a metaphor. A child who didn't make a sound, who watched the world decide things about her mother. A manager who had mistaken policy for wisdom. In his office on the 34th floor, he stood by the window and let Bay Street's arteries pulse beneath him. He pictured Lily's small hands, the way she reached for her mother as if love were gravity. Unarguable. He remembered another small hand his sister's warm for the last time before the fire, before the years taught him to fold his feelings into clean lines and crisp margins. He turned from the glass, opened his day planner, and pressed the wrinkled heart-shaped sticker onto the inside cover. It clung him perfectly, like all the truest things in his life. "Jane?" he said into the intercom. His assistant's voice answered, brisk and bright. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell. Coordinate with HR. Make sure the daycare spot is more than provisional. And assign someone to walk her through the building Monday. No scavenger hunt onboarding. Also," he hesitated, then didn't, "schedule 15 minutes for me with her at the end of day 1. "Noted," Jane said, flint spark efficient. "A beat, good call." He didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth lifted. Monday began with light that made the city look rinsed. Rachel rose before dawn, packed a lunch for Lily: sliced apple, a tiny cube of cheddar, crackers that didn't crumble too much, and braided her daughter's hair into 2 lopsided plaits. She wore the blouse she'd ironed and the shoes she'd polished, a thrift store blazer that fit like it had been waiting for her the whole time. On the bus, Lily pressed her forehead to the window, narrating the city in a whisper. "That's where the big dog was last time. That street has the rainbow flag. Look, Mommy, the tower." The CN Tower speared the sky, ridiculous and reassuring. Rachel tightened her grip on the strap and breathed. Northbridge Co. looked different on a Monday morning, even inside the same marble. It wasn't just the volume of people, the choreography of lawn yards and coffees. It was the way she entered this time, not as a supplicant, as a participant. A woman in a navy dress waited by reception with a tablet. "Rachel Morgan?" she asked, smiling with her whole face. "Yes," Rachel said, cheeks warming. "Hi, I'm Mariah from HR, welcome. We'll get Lily to level 3, and then do your badge photo and a whirlwind tour." "Ready?" Lily squeezed Rachel's hand. "I'm ready," she declared, bravery manufactured by proximity. Level 3 smelled faintly of crayons and something sugary. The daycare director smoothed ponytail, competent eyes knelt to Lily's level. "We've got a cubby with your name on it," she said. "Do you like giraffes or rockets?" "Giraffes," Lily said, as if the answer had always been waiting in her mouth. Rachel bent to kiss her daughter. "I'll be downstairs," she whispered. "You can draw me a sun with too many rays. That's my specialty," Lily said solemnly. And then she was off, a small comet bending toward a table of blocks, already narrating a story to a new friend. The tug in Rachel's chest surprised her. It wasn't fear. It was relief, so acute it masqueraded as ache. She stood for a heartbeat longer than necessary, watching the top of Lily's head as if it were the most important graph she'd ever read. Mariah touched her elbow. "We'll check on her at lunch," she said softly. "Come on, badge photo, email credentials, an employee handbook that weighed as much as an unabridged dictionary and read twice as dense." Mariah was swift to floors up, copy room, supply closet, kitchen with the good coffee, quiet rooms, lactation room even though Rachel didn't need it, and the spot by the window people fought over for its light. "Your station is here," Mariah said at last, stopping by a pod outside a frosted glass corridor. "Executive operations support. You'll shadow Anna for the first few days. She's excellent. Also, this hallway leads to the CEO's office. If you see a sprinting blur named Jane, step aside." As if conjured by mention, Jane appeared, all clean lines and purposeful stride. "Ms. Morgan," she said, offering a hand. "Welcome aboard. I run Mr. Caldwell's calendar. If you need a miracle, I'm the person you ask before you try him." A glint of humor softened the words. "There's a 15-minute check-in on your schedule for 5:15 today. Bring questions. He prefers substance to small talk." "Understood," Rachel said, grateful for the clarity. Anna, the woman she'd shadow, rolled her chair back and stood. "You must be Rachel," she said, warm where others were polished. "I've heard you're quick. Good. Mondays are a test for everyone." They sat. The day unfolded. Calendar triage, vendor calls, internal ticketing system with color coding that at first looked like a fruit salad, and then made thrilling sense. Anna talked at speed, but paused whenever Rachel's face tensed, backtracking without condescension. "You're not expected to be perfect," she said at one point. "You're expected to learn. Those are different jobs." At noon, Anna nudged her. "Go see Lily," she said, not looking up from her screen. "If anyone asks, I sent you. Because I'm human." Lily's sun had 21 rays and a giraffe under it with eyelashes like a movie star. I'm brave, Lily reported. Also, we had crackers. Rachel laughed, surprised at the sound of it, how it felt like it came from somewhere new. Back upstairs. The afternoon thickened in that way office afternoons do, full of micro-decisions and emails that solved problems no one would see. At 4:57, Rachel's stomach remembered it had been polite all day and now wanted attention. She took a breath big enough to count as courage and stood. Jane met her at the frosted door. "He's running on time," she said, an announcement that could have commanded a parade. Inside, Ethan's office was less intimidating than the building would suggest. Glass, yes. View, yes. But there was a plant that had survived and a mug with a chip in it on the credenza human proofs. Small and necessary. "Rachel," he said, rising. "How was day one?" She willed herself not to say fine like a teenager. "Good," she said. "Hard in the right ways. I'm grateful for Anna and for the daycare. Lily made a friend named Ava who thinks giraffes are just horses in pajamas." The corner of his mouth lifted. She may be right. He gestured to a chair. She sat. He listened. She told him where the processes sang and where they snagged, what confused her, where she felt useful. He asked questions that didn't condescend. For 15 minutes, they did something modern companies rarely do. They used time with intent. When she stood to leave, she thanked him again. He shook his head lightly. "You thank me already," he said. "Do the work. That's the thanks that lasts." In the doorway, she hesitated. "Mr. Caldwell, why did you stop in the lobby that day?" He considered a beat longer than necessary. "Because I wanted to hear the person being talked over," he said at last. Turns out she had something worth hearing. Outside, Jane handed Rachel a small envelope. "For daycare," she said. "A voucher from the company fund. Don't argue. It's anonymized and there for a reason." Rachel swallowed. "Thank you. Thank him by showing up tomorrow," Jane said, not unkindly. "On time, prepared, and yourself." On the bus home, Lily fell asleep on Rachel's lap, her fist still around a purple crayon. The city flickered by neon, tail lights, windows pulsing with stranger lives. Rachel pressed her forehead to the cool glass she didn't know about. The email Catherine had drafted to clarify boundaries around executive interactions she didn't know about. The gossip that would begin with a photo snapped from a lobby mezzanine. She didn't know where the cracks were in the floor she'd begun to walk, but for the first time in a long time, she knew the feeling of a day that went forward instead of sideways. And somewhere on the 34th floor, a heart-shaped sticker stuck imperfectly to a planner page held fast. The careless glue doing a careful job. Tomorrow would test them both. The morning air in downtown Toronto tasted of exhaust and fresh bagels. Rachel stepped off the bus clutching Lily's small hand. Both of them bundled against a wind that sliced through Bay Street like it owned the place. Northbridge Tower loomed ahead, glass flashing like a sentinel. It was only her second week, but already Rachel could feel the building testing her, each revolving door, each ID swipe, each elevator ding whispering, "Do you belong here?" She reminded herself that belonging wasn't something given. It was something proved, one steady step at a time. Inside, Lily skipped toward the daycare entrance on level 3, her tiny backpack bouncing. "Bye, Mommy," she chirped, pressing a sloppy kiss to Rachel's cheek before darting inside. Watching her go, Rachel felt that strange ache again, the ache of freedom she hadn't had in years, paired with the guilt of handing her child over to strangers. But she turned, straightened her blazer, and climbed toward the 24th floor. Her desk sat in a pot of 4, tucked just outside the frosted corridor leading to the executive offices. Anna, her mentor, was already tapping at her keyboard with caffeinated precision. "Morning," she said without looking up. "You've got meeting minutes from yesterday, vendor requests piling in. And oh, don't forget to breathe." Rachel smiled nervously and logged in. The screen filled with notifications, acronyms she barely understood, and calendar invites that felt like a foreign language. She copied Anna's shortcuts, whispered questions when stuck, and learned to mask panic behind polite concentration. Every time she fumbled, Anna nudged her back with a quick correction. "Delete that thread. No one needs 6 replies of thanks. Efficiency is kindness." By noon, Rachel's head throbbed. She escaped to the daycare for a few minutes. where Lily proudly showed her a finger painting of a giraffe standing under a rainbow. "This is our new house," Lily explained. Rachel blinked back tears at the blob of purple crayon that Lily had decided was Mommy's desk. Back upstairs, Rachel carried the picture in her folder like armor. But not everyone on the 24th floor wanted her to succeed. By midweek, the whispers had started. Two co-workers leaned together near the copier, voices pitched just low enough to be overheard. "She's only here because Caldwell walked in at the right time. Trial hire." Reporting straight to him? Come on, if I brought my nephew to an interview, I'd be laughed out of the building. Watch. She'll be gone in 2 weeks. Rachel kept her head down, stapling reports. But the words cut sharp. She told herself to ignore it. That gossip was just the office's background hum. Still, her stomach coiled. That Thursday, the crisis hit. Rachel had stayed late the night before to finish quarterly report rows of numbers, swimming until her eyes burned. She mailed them off at 10:43 p.m., closed her laptop in the dim motel light, and collapsed next to Lily, who was snoring softly. The next morning, traffic snarled on Queen Street, and by the time she sprinted through Northbridge's revolving door, daycare check-in had eaten her buffer. She reached her desk at 8:39, 9 minutes late. Catherine Blake was waiting, arms folded, lips pinched. "This isn't a coffee shop shift, Ms. Morgan. Punctuality matters," Rachel flushed. "I stayed late to finish the reports." "That's not the point," Catherine snapped. "This is a professional environment. Your personal obligations cannot." Her voice carried, pulling eyes from cubicles. Rachel felt the ground tilt. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, another voice cut in low, even, but commanding. "Is there a problem?" Ethan Caldwell stood in the corridor, jacket slung over one arm. Conversations nearby froze like water in January. Catherine straightened. "Just addressing attendance, sir. Ms. Morgan was late." Ethan's gaze flicked to Rachel. 9 minutes. Rachel nodded once, throat tight. "And the reports?" Ethan asked. "Completed," Rachel said. "Sent last night." Ethan turned to Catherine. "So the work is done, and done on time. Then the point is what, exactly?" Catherine's jaw tightened. "Standards must be maintained, and they will be," Ethan interrupted. His voice didn't rise, but it carried. "By rewarding output, not punishing circumstances." Ms. Morgan stayed late to meet the deadline. "She's here now. Let's move forward." He didn't wait for agreement. He looked back at Rachel, his expression unreadable, but not unkind. "Keep it up." Then he vanished into the executive wing. The glass doors whispering closed behind him. The silence he left behind was heavier than his words. Catherine pursed her lips and stalked off. Rachel sat slowly, fingers trembling on her keyboard, cheeks burning. Anna leaned over just enough to murmur, "Breathe." That was a win, Rachel exhaled, air shaky in her lungs. A win, maybe, but victories in this place felt double-edged. Every step forward seemed to carve a deeper shadow behind her. That night, on the bus home, Rachel pressed her forehead to the window and let the city blur into streaks of neon and rain. Lily slept across her lap, arms curled tight around the giraffe drawing. Rachel whispered into the glass, so quietly only the city could hear, "Please, just let me keep this chance." What she didn't know was that on the 34th floor, Ethan sat in his office with the lights low, flipping through her reports. They weren't perfect typos, rough formatting, but they were careful, thorough, and honest. And taped to the inside cover of his planner. The wrinkled heart-shaped sticker still held. Saturday sunlight spilled across High Park, turning the leaves into stained glass overhead. Toronto's largest green stretch hummed with weekend life, children chasing soccer balls, cyclists flashing past, families sprawled on blankets with coffee cups steaming in the cool air. Rachel carried a thrift store tote bag heavy with snacks, holding Lily's hand as they wandered toward the duck pond. It was her one ritual that cost nothing: a long walk, a few crackers for the birds, and a blanket under the maple trees where Lily could color while Rachel exhaled. But today, Lily tugged her toward the grass near the playground. "Mommy, look, trash." Sure enough, a crumpled water bottle was tangled in the roots. Rachel knelt, pulled it free, and handed it to her daughter. "Okay, Lily, where does this go?" The little girl scanned the park, spotted a green trash can, and sprinted toward it with solemn purpose. She shoved the bottle in with a triumphant clap, as if she had saved the world. Rachel laughed, brushing grass from her knees. "That's my girl." And then a voice answered from behind her. "That is your girl. Responsible citizen already." She turned. Ethan Caldwell stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of a weekend jacket. The charcoal suits traded for dark jeans and an open collar shirt. Without the armor of glass offices and polished marble, he looked younger, almost ordinary, except his presence never quite let him blend in. "Mr. Caldwell," Rachel said quickly, almost too formal. "Ethan, outside the office," he corrected with a small smile. Before Rachel could respond, Lily barreled back and stopped short. "Mr. Ethan," she squealed, as if seeing an old friend. He crouched instantly to her level. "Miss Lily," he said gravely, bowing like a knight. "Excellent work with the bottle." "High Park thanks you," Lily giggled, hiding her face in her mother's leg. Rachel's cheeks warmed. "We didn't expect." "Neither did I," Ethan said. "But I'm glad." They ended up at a small pizza place across from the park, the kind with red-checked tablecloths and outdoor seating. Lily swung her legs from the bench, cheeks smudged with tomato sauce, while Rachel dabbed at her napkin, still unsure how to behave outside the boundaries of an office. "You don't have to do this," Rachel said softly. "I wanted to," Ethan replied. "Besides, no one should eat alone on a Saturday if they don't have to." She studied him then. Not the CEO from business magazines, but a man cutting Lily's pizza into smaller pieces without being asked. Something unguarded moved in her chest. "Was that how you were raised?" she asked. "Kindness first." He paused, knife resting against the crust. His voice lowered. "No, I was raised to think kindness was rare. A gift you were lucky to stumble across. My sister." He trailed off, eyes shifting to the street, as if memory itself was too sharp to hold. "She died when I was 12, a fire. I thought I could save her. I didn't." Rachel inhaled quietly, the story hanging between them like smoke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged, but it was a shrug that didn't reach his bones. "Since then, I've built things, companies, systems, shields. They work. But sometimes I wonder if they keep more out than they let in." Rachel's throat tightened. She thought of nights counting coins for diapers, of mornings lying to Lily mommy already ate, sweetie, because there wasn't enough food for both. She thought of how she had folded her grief into neat boxes, stacking them where no one would see. "Surviving," she said softly, "is waking up every day pretending you've got it together, when really everything you love is in pieces." Ethan looked at her then, not as a boss, not as a benefactor, but as someone who recognized the echo of his own silence. Across the table, Lily yawned dramatically, drawing a butterfly on her napkin with a crayon. She held it up proudly. "See? It's flying to the sun." Ethan smiled, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a performance. The sky began to cool by the time they walked back through High Park. Rachel zipped Lily's jacket tighter, but Ethan noticed her shiver too. Without a word, he slipped his own coat from his shoulders and draped it around her. "You don't have to," she started. "I do," he interrupted gently. "A good leader notices who's shivering in silence." Rachel froze. The sentence landed heavier than she expected, tugging at walls she had built so carefully. She looked at him, really looked, not as the man on magazine covers, but as someone who had just made her daughter safe for a fleeting second. She wasn't a trial hire, and he wasn't a CEO. They were just a people, both carrying scars, both daring to feel the edges of something that might grow. On Monday morning, the world snapped back. Rachel found herself summoned to a conference room, blinds half drawn, Catherine Blake already waiting with a folder on the table. Inside were photos, grainy shots of High Park, Lily perched on Ethan's shoulders, Ethan's coat draped around her daughter, Rachel laughing in the sunlight. The captions from an anonymous gossip forum scrolled across Catherine's tablet. "Single mom plays her cards right. CEO's favorite. No wonder she got hired." Rachel's stomach dropped. "You understand the situation," Catherine said coolly. "The optics. Sign this resignation, and we'll call it a mutual separation." No further questions. Rachel stared at the pen on the table. The fluorescent lights hummed. Lily's drawing of the giraffe, tucked in her folder, seemed to whisper don't. Her hand hovered, then the door opened. Ethan Caldwell stepped inside. That his gaze swept the table, the folder, the pen. Then he looked at Rachel, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her. You don't need to sign anything, he said evenly. She's done nothing wrong. Catherine's lips thinned. Mr. Caldwell, the optics, then changed the lens, Ethan replied. Silence filled the room, heavier than any signature dot, and in that silence, something between them shifted again, deeper, stronger, undeniable. The fallout spread through Northbridge Tower faster than an email blast. By Tuesday morning, the whispers had crystallized into full sentences. Rachel heard them in the break room while pouring stale coffee, in the elevator where conversations cut off mid-sentence as she stepped in, even in the daycare hallway when she picked up Lily. She's cozying up to the boss. No wonder she got that trial spot, playing the single mom card. Genius move. Rachel forced her face into neutrality, but each word burned like frostbite. She reminded herself of her work, the reports filed on time, the spreadsheets cleaned of errors, the phone calls handled with steady courtesy. Yet in this office, rumor weighed heavier than results. By midweek, the gossip reached her desk in the ugliest form, a printed screenshot left on her chair. It showed the blurry High Park photo of Ethan draping his coat over Lily's shoulders. The caption, scrawled in Sharpie, nice strategy. Rachel's hands shook as she crumpled the paper and shoved it deep into the trash. But the ache in her chest refused to be hidden. That afternoon, Catherine summoned her to a glass-walled conference room. The folder was waiting again, thicker now, stuffed with printouts of online threads, blurry phone photos, even a doctored meme of Rachel as Cinderella clutching Ethan's hand. You've become a liability, Catherine said smoothly, as though reading from a script. Northbridge cannot afford scandal. If you resign voluntarily, we'll provide a modest severance and neutral reference. Otherwise, she let the silence fill the space, heavy with implied ruin. Rachel's throat tightened. I've done nothing wrong. That's not the point, Catherine countered. It's perception, and perception is reality in this business. Rachel's pulse roared in her ears. She thought of the nights she'd scrubbed motel floors while Lily slept, of the countless shifts at diners where tips bought diapers, of the mornings she lied to her daughter, Mommy isn't hungry, you finished the cereal. Every step forward had been clawed from stone. And now, after all of it, they wanted her to step down quietly, as if her existence was an inconvenience. Her hand hovered near the pen on the table. She could almost feel Catherine's victory waiting. And then the door opened. Ethan Caldwell walked in. His entrance wasn't loud, but it rewrote the room. Catherine straightened, her professional mask cracking for a blink. What's going on here? Ethan asked. His eyes landed on the folder, then on Rachel's pale face. Catherine recovered quickly. We're handling an HR matter. Ms. Morgan's presence is creating noise. For her own sake and the company's, I was advising she resign gracefully. Ethan's gaze hardened. Noise. He pulled the folder closer, flipped through the page's photos, gossip threads, cruel commentary. He closed it with finality. This isn't her noise, he said. It's ours. It's what we've tolerated, and I won't ask her to pay the price for our cowardice. Rachel's breath caught. For once, she wasn't invisible. Mr. Caldwell, Catherine tried, her tone tightening, with respect. This could harm your reputation. Then let it, Ethan cut in. I'm not afraid of noise. He turned to Rachel, voice softer. You've done nothing wrong. You don't need to sign anything. Rachel stared at him, the pen trembling in her hand. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Ethan didn't hesitate. Because you matter. Because the people who work the hardest shouldn't be the ones left most vulnerable. The words sliced through the fog of humiliation, through months of exhaustion. For the first time in years, Rachel felt not just offended, but believed. Catherine's lips thinned to a line. Optics, she began again. Optics can be changed, Ethan said firmly. Perception follows leadership. He pushed the folder back across the table. This meeting is over. He gestured toward the door. Rachel stood, her knees weak, and followed him out. The hallway outside buzzed with the usual office churn, phones ringing, printers churning, keyboards clattering, but to Rachel it felt strangely hushed. Ethan walked beside her, not rushing, not speaking, just steady. When the elevator arrived, he held the door. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "Just keep showing up. Let your work speak." Rachel looked at him then, really looked. Not the CEO, not the rescuer, but the man who had chosen to stand with her, not in front of her. Her chest tightened. "I will," she said. The doors slid shut. For the next 3 days, Rachel avoided the executive floor as much as possible. She took early lunches, stayed late to finish tasks after the building emptied, even used the service elevators to dodge attention. The gossip still swirled, but she clung to Ethan's words like a lifeline. On Friday, just as she shut down her computer, an email arrived from his assistant Jane. Subject line: calendar invite, rooftop, 6:15 p.m. No agenda. Just the time and place. Rachel stared at the screen, pulse racing. She almost declined. Almost. But at 6:12, with her blazer buttoned tight and her heart rattling like a loose window pane, she pushed open the stairwell door to the roof. The city spread golden beneath a bruised sky. The CN Tower glowed in the distance, the lake catching the last fire of the sun. Ethan stood near the ledge, suit jacket folded neatly on a chair, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The wind teased his hair, and for a moment he looked carved from the skyline itself. He turned when she stepped out. "You came," Rachel swallowed. "I wasn't sure I should. I wasn't sure I should ask." He admitted that the silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. Finally, Ethan said, "They were wrong about you." His voice was steady but low. "But they weren't wrong about me. I've built walls so high that when I finally opened a door, the world assumed it was scandal." Rachel's chest ached. "Why me? Why now?" He looked at her then, eyes rimmed with something raw. "Because you reminded me of my sister. Because you walked into a room full of judgment and stood anyway. Because," he exhaled, "because you're real in a world that's forgotten what that looks like." Rachel's throat closed. For a moment, she forgot about gossip, about daycare invoices, about motel rent. There was only the man in front of her and the way the city lights flickered like stars below. She stepped closer, slowly, carefully, and when his hand found hers, warm and steady, neither of them said a word. The rooftop was hushed except for the steady push of the wind. Toronto sprawled in every direction, skyscrapers blinking alive as twilight folded into night. For a long moment, Rachel and Ethan stood side by side, hands linked, saying nothing. Words would have shattered something delicate that had only just begun to exist. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low enough the wind almost stole it. "When I was 12, there was a fire. My sister, Lily, she was 7, bright-eyed, always drawing butterflies. I thought I could reach her. I thought I was fast enough." His breath caught, sharp and jagged. "I wasn't." Rachel turned, her chest aching. He wasn't the controlled CEO in that moment. He was a boy still standing in front of flames he could never put out. "You don't have to carry that forever," she whispered. His jaw clenched. "Maybe not. But I've built everything since then as if I could buy redemption tower after tower, deal after deal. And at the end of the day, I eat dinner alone in a penthouse that echoes when it rains." Rachel's eyes stung. She thought of her own nights, Lily's small body curled beside her in cheap motel rooms, of counting coins under flickering fluorescent lights. "You don't owe anyone redemption, Ethan. Survival isn't weakness. It's proof." Something shifted in his face like a wall cracking just enough for light to enter. Slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand again. Warmth steadied her, as if the skyline itself had leaned in to listen. Neither of them moved closer, but neither pulled away. The city roared below them, but on the roof there was only silence, steady and alive. 2 nights later, the storm came. The motel's power flickered, then died. Rain slammed against thin windows, seeping through the cracks. Rachel lit her phone screen as Lily shivered under a damp blanket. "Mommy, I'm cold," Lily whispered, voice trembling. Rachel pressed her tighter against her chest, but the chill seeped through everything. She stared at the water dripping from the ceiling, panic rising. She didn't know who else to call. Her fingers hovered over her contacts. Then, with a trembling breath, she typed, "Power's out. Roof leaking." Lily's shivering. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call." The reply came in less than a minute. I'm on my way. 15 minutes. Headlights cut through the storm. Ethan's SUV pulled up, wipers struggling against sheets of rain. Rachel stepped outside, clutching Lily under an umbrella. Water plastered her hair to her forehead. Ethan jumped out before the car even stopped fully. He took the umbrella, shielding both mother and child, and guided them quickly inside. The ride was silent except for Lily's muffled sniffles and the rhythmic hiss of rain. Rachel pressed her lips together, humiliated and grateful all at once. 15 minutes later, they stepped into his penthouse, glass walls washed with lightning, hardwood floors gleaming under low lamps. Ethan handed Rachel a robe that looked like it belonged in another world, and found dry leggings from a donation box he kept for staff drives. Rachel changed in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. She looked out of place, an imposter in borrowed fabric. But when she stepped into the kitchen, Lily already sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, giggling at a cartoon on the flat screen. "You didn't have to do this," Rachel murmured as Ethan stirred pasta on the stove. "You drove through a storm for a job interview." He replied without looking up, "Dinner is the least I can do." The smell of garlic filled the room. Rachel's chest tightened. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone cook for her. They ate quietly at the kitchen island, 3 plates, 3 forks, steam curling into the air. Lily chattered between bites, describing her daycare friend Ava and the giraffe drawing she'd given to the teacher. Ethan listened as if every word was a headline. Later, Lily fell asleep on the couch, small arms wrapped around her stuffed giraffe. Ethan draped a blanket over her, his movements gentle. Rachel leaned against the doorway, heart aching at the sight. "She always picks the movie," she said softly, "then never makes it through." He smiled faintly. "She's out." The room filled with the hum of credits rolling on the screen, the storm outside easing into mist. Rachel's chest tightened until the words slipped out. "I'm scared," she whispered. Of hoping too much, Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at her with a gaze steady enough to anchor the whole city. "Then let me carry some of that," he said simply. Rachel's shoulders softened, the walls around her cracking just enough to let warmth through. Lily shifted in her sleep, one tiny hand finding Ethan's arm as if he had always been there. Rachel met his gaze. No declarations, no grand gestures, just truth, unadorned. For the first time, she let herself believe she wasn't alone anymore. 1 year later, the auditorium at Northbridge Co. was packed wall to wall. Rows of employees leaned forward in their seats, the buzz of anticipation softening into silence as Rachel Morgan stepped onto the stage. She wore a simple navy blazer, her hair pulled neatly back, a name badge clipped over her heart, Director of Training and Development. Her palms still sweated, even after weeks of preparation. But she drew a breath and found Lily in the front row, legs swinging from her chair, and Ethan just behind her, arms crossed, gaze steady. "Not long ago," Rachel began, her voice catching before steadying, "I was counting quarters for diapers. I was working 3 jobs, studying online after my daughter fell asleep, and praying for just one chance to be seen." The room held its breath. "I walked into this building with a child on my hip and was told I didn't belong. But someone listened anyway. And because of that, I stand here today not to tell you my story, but to tell you our story. Every parent who keeps going when the world tells them to stop. Every invisible worker who shows up anyway." Her eyes swept the audience. "That's why we've built a new program, New Roots. It's for people like me. For people like many of you, because growth doesn't start at the top. It starts at the roots." Applause rolled through the hall, thunderous and unrelenting. But Rachel only saw one pair of eyes, Ethan's, steady and proud, as if the moment were his victory too. That afternoon, the 3 of them walked hand in hand through Toronto Islands Park, Lily skipping between them, her laughter scattering like birds. Rachel on one side, Ethan on the other, their fingers brushing across Lily's tiny hands. They didn't speak of love. They didn't need to. Every step said it louder than words. On the ferry ride back, Ethan reached quietly for Rachel's hand. She let him, her heart no longer panicked by the idea of being held. Months later, the wedding was nothing like the glossy spreads people imagined for a CEO. It was small, simple, held on a windswept beach in Nova Scotia. bare feet pressed into warm sand. Close friends circled in folding chairs, sea foam kissing the shore. Rachel walked down a flower-lined path, Lily skipping ahead, tossing petals like confetti in every direction. Ethan stood waiting, barefoot in linen, eyes unguarded and full. The officiant smiled. "Do you, Ethan Caldwell, take this woman and her daughter into your heart, your life, your forever?" Ethan looked at them both, his voice breaking and sure all at once. "I already have. And do you, Rachel Morgan, take this man into your heart, your life, your forever?" Rachel turned to Lily, who beamed as if she had planned the whole thing. Then she turned back to Ethan. "Yes," she said, tears bright in her eyes. "Yes, I do." Cheers rose, gulls cried overhead, and Lily clapped louder than anyone, her stuffed giraffe tucked under one arm. Later that evening, as the sun fell into the ocean, Ethan handed Rachel a folded envelope. Inside was a legal transfer, shares of Northbridge, signed into joint equity. Her name printed clearly, or Rachel's breath caught. "Ethan, this isn't about money," he said quietly. "It's about belonging. This company started with me. It continues with us." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something fiercer than gratitude, certainty. At home, Lily curled on the couch, asleep in the same blanket she had carried into that first interview. Ethan and Rachel stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing plates to the hum of quiet music. No headlines, no whispers, no judgment, just a family, finally whole. Rachel thought of that morning in the lobby, the spilled water, the humiliation, the weight of being invisible. She smiled at the memory, not because it was easy, but because it was proof of how far they had come. Sometimes what feels like the end of the road is really the beginning of something beautiful. She hadn't walked into Northbridge Tower looking for a miracle. She had walked in with courage, and in the end, courage had given her more than a job. It had given her a home.